In this episode, we will examine the major arcana cards in the Spencer Tarot deck 11 through 15. Now to a very favorite card, Lust. Lust deals with enjoying life and doing one's passions. It's living from a place of liberation, passion, awareness, aliveness, desire to live more creatively, and owning your own personal strengths. The Lust card requires you to overcome fear and take more risks. And also, this card is associated with being more sexually free and more romantic in your life. Lust is the card of indulgence, being a sensualist. Lust also refers to enjoying nature, body self-care, and experience new places and new people. Lust is an interesting card. A lot of times, specifically, I thought about when I was growing up. Again, I have mentioned many times I came from a very strict Christian background. And there was a lot of this idea of people putting sexual repression onto you. You're only supposed to have sex to procreate. That kind of an idea instead of, sexual freedom to pleasure yourself, pleasure your partner, and to love who you choose. And Lust deals with that. Lust deals with the ability to live out your sexual fantasies, try new things. And this is often with some people, very difficult. I purposely, on this card, I am a gay male, and I thought, you know what, let me put like a really beefy, well-hung guy in leather, in that is something I'm attracted to. And why not? Lust is about it's okay to indulge. It's okay to have that part of your nature that doesn't repress aspects of yourself. A lot of times, too, we're told, oh, it's okay to be romantic and loving, but we can't just be uninhibited, for example. We can't be a bit fetish if we want to be. And this is breaking down all of those rules people place on themselves. It's very interesting because this card, I find, comes up a lot with a lot of people that have been brought up in very strict households concerning relationships. I have, for example, a lot of Indian friends that are in arranged marriages. That's part of their culture. And they aren't happy sexually, and they're just told, we just do what our parents tell us to do as part of our religion. We marry who someone sets up for us. There's an example of that. Again, I know a lot of people that come from the Christian sexual repression hypocrisy, where they've been molested by priests in the church, but told at the same time, you only are supposed to get married and procreate, and you're not supposed to masturbate, and you're not supposed to do this and that, and all of this repression. This card is an interesting one because I always was rebellious. I was always like, nobody tells me what to do. That's very Aquarius. And I remember growing up as I was coming into my sexuality and what I enjoyed and what I liked, never having a problem with that, with my friends knowing, my teachers knowing, but just being incredibly abusive and restrictive in my own family. Another aspect of this card that's interesting to me is I remember one time in my life I was very much madly in love with someone I was dating who came from this, came from a strict military, born again Christian background. And that person I was with could not let loose, could not enjoy sex, could not enjoy being in his body, could not enjoy freedom. There was a sense of shame. There was a sense of dirtiness. And lust card breaks through all of this. And that's why it's a card I very much like. It's the exhibitionist card too, and that's something that I find fascinating here in the U.S. I've always had no problem with just going to a beach and being nude, and that's how we're born. Why should animals go around naked? Why should we be ashamed of our bodies? And yet we're taught in our culture here in the U.S. that there's something wrong with that. And I find that fascinating, having traveled and having been in parts of the Caribbean or different places where nudity is not even an issue, and here it very much is. And that's just another aspect. Sensualist. How many people allow themselves to just feel good in their body? How many people allow themselves time to just soak in a hot tub or to get a massage, to walk around their home naked if they feel like it? I see so many people with hang-ups with that. People like, oh, I don't like to be touched, or I don't like, I have to cover up, or it's wrong, or, Jesus wouldn't like that. All of these, kind of stupid restrictions we place on each other. Another thing is, which I find fascinating, is, again, societal rules. For example, in the Renaissance, because of the shorter life experience, couples got married super young. People got married at 14 even. Look at Romeo and Juliet, the most famous lovers of literature. They fell in love and were being sexual at 14. And, in other cultures, you don't get married till you're 25. So what makes one wrong and one right? I remember the stigma of my soulmate was 13 years older than me, and I met my husband when I was 15, which is kind of young, and my partner was technically 28, which was, in a way, technically illegal, and yet that was the best relationship I ever had in my life. How about the stipulation I have? I had a hygienist, my dental hygienist, and she was 30 and her husband was almost 30 years older than her, and they were happily married till his death for like 40 years or something like that, madly in love with each other. And what makes that wrong? You see what I'm saying? We place all these rules. I know some friends that are in a trio relationship, and all three of them have been together for 20 years. What makes that wrong? We put all of these demands on you. We have to do what society says, and then we put ourselves in these repressed boxes where we're unhappy. And this is why you have problems of the divorce rate in the U.S. being the highest it's ever been. You have people miserable in their marriage and relationships, or staying in toxic relationships and not enjoying themselves. You have couples afraid to talk about, what their sexual desires are. You have people afraid to, do their passions. And passions can not just be sexual. I know I've been talking quite a bit about sexual passion and lust, but lust can be just wanting to do a hobby or something. I'll never forget. I want to tell one story here. I had a student who was 70 years old in my senior citizen music appreciation class. She came to me after class crying, And I said to her, honey, what's wrong? And she goes, all my life, all I wanted to do for myself was to be an opera singer. But I grew up as a child in the 40s, and my parents were very religious, and they said only harlots go on the stage, and I wasn't allowed to sing. And then right after that, I got married, and I have a loving husband. But we decided to have children, and I raised children, and never really had the time to cultivate becoming an opera singer. And she goes, now I'm 70, two, I think she was 73, something like that. My children are in other states. My husband has passed on, and I'm too old. And I said to her, honey, what age would you be if you didn't do it? You're still going to be the same age. I live down the street from you. Why don't you get into classical voice and just do it for fun? So she finally, took her a couple of months to get over her fear, and then she did. She got in with me, and she loved it. It changed her life. So all of a sudden, since she's retired, she had the time to practice 3 and 4 hours a day and really study. And within about a year, I said to her, you're ready to be in an opera. And she goes, oh, who would want me in an opera? I'm just an old woman, and I have arthritis, and nobody's gonna put me in an opera, ha ha ha. And I said, well, you're gonna do an audition, and that's your next homework. And she was terrified of that, like, oh, but I can't indulge in that. And I kept saying to her, and I used the word lust. This is your lust. This is your passion. Do it. Give yourself the gift of enjoying what you love. And she finally went up to LA and auditioned at 72 for the chorus of LA Opera and got in. And she calls me up, and she's crying and goes, oh my God, Jim, I did it. I'm going to be in LA Opera. I met, Placido Domingo, who's going to direct this opera. And I go, I love opera. What opera are you doing? I'm going to be in the chorus of La Traviata. I go, oh my gosh, that is my favorite Verdi opera. I'm so excited for you. And it's like, oh, Jim, it's like a fairy tale dream. Like you should see the costumes I get to wear, and people pampering me in the dressing room, and I'm singing, on the stage of one of the biggest opera houses in the world. And I go, you did it. So anyway, she's at the rehearsal for La Traviata, and she sees this handsome, distinguished gentleman who, interestingly enough, has some of the traits of my guy on my card. He has a handlebar mustache, and an older guy, but kind of beefy and muscular, and Italian with some, pepper gray hair. And she calls me up and says, oh my God, I haven't had thoughts like this in years. She said, my thighs were tingling. And I go, oh, do tell, honey. And she goes, I met this guy in the opera company, but he's 60. He's way younger than me. He would not be interested in me. And I said, just flirt with him, see what happens. So she bakes him some cookies and goes up to him after an opera rehearsal, and they start talking, and they hit it off. And they fall in love, and now she's married to this hot, younger Italian guy, and she lives between, her dream house in Italy and her place here in Seal Beach, living the life and breaking all her inhibitions and completely revolutionizing her life. And that is what the lust card could do. So I'll just leave it at that. Okay, so enjoy, indulge. Now to, in my opinion, one of the scariest cards for a lot of people in the deck. 12. The Hangman. If you notice the Hangman, we see someone being hung upside down, in terror. And this represents sort of like when you are in that restrictiveness of life where maybe you just don't know the next answer. You're in limbo. Nothing's working out for you. You're stuck. That's what this card represents, being stuck. But usually being stuck is a mental thing. We need to learn to reframe how we see things. So the Hangman is the transformer card. It is breaking free of areas in one's life where you feel stuck, eliminating the beliefs that hold you back, the ability to surrender and receive and trust that things will change. It's a deep desire to change. This card gets into the hidden subconscious beliefs and exposes what is not working, so for healing. And it's a time for a breakthrough. This card is a powerful card, even though it's a scary card. I look at the card I created, and again, I tend to love Gothic imagery. And if you look, you see all these kind of creepy embalming, I don't say embalming, but like meat hooks and things hanging from this decayed tree. And this guy is upside down, suspended in midair, and there's all these dark clouds around him, which represent the dark clouds of his brain, and he is terrified, and he's not going anywhere. And this is sort of like what happens in our mind. We get in mental loops that we can't get out of. I was working with a client for 2 months that every tarot reading I gave her, she got the Hangman. And I kept saying, you are focused on debt. Because she had other cards around her that said that. You're focused on lack. You're worried. I'm going into more debt. What ifs? All the what ifs. Hangman is very connected to the what ifs. What if I lose my job? What if I can't pay off my debt? What if I can't, pay the rent on my apartment? What if my car breaks down and I can't get to work? What ifs, okay? And that thinking will keep you stuck where you can't figure out the answers. And that's what I worked with her on for 2 months. She was also, people that are in Hangman are addicted to their victimhood. This pisses people off, but it's the truth. If you're poor, you're getting something out of being poor. If you want a relationship and you're alone and you keep saying, I'm alone, you're getting something out of being alone. If you are severely ill and you own your disease, then you're getting something out of that. And that pisses people off to hear, but that's the truth. And sometimes it's just that rephrasing that can, revolutionize and change your life. For example, I'll use something in my life. About 8 years ago, I had norovirus. It came off a cruise ship, and I was very, very ill. And for almost 1 year, I had terrible gastric things, and I had people say, you need to go get a colonoscopy and do all this medication and maybe get surgery. And I did the opposite. I said, you know what? I'm going to make my body come into balance, and I'm going to heal myself holistically. Doctors tried to scare me, and I was in this limbo of horrible health. And I realized that I started going into, because of my norovirus, I can't eat right. Because this happened to me, I have anxiety. And I was doing the wrong thinking. Finally, I got with the right holistic doctors and people that helped me rephrase. And I was, and every day when people say, oh, I know you've been really sick, how's your illness? I said, I'm not ill. My body's coming back into balance very quickly. See, I started to reframe things, and guess what happened? I had a miraculous healing. And yes, it took me a little over a year, but that to me is amazing. I cured myself naturally and with rephrasing my brain, where one of my friends who also got Nora at the time ended up having to have his intestines cut into and went through, all kinds of medications and colonoscopies and problems with that. And I didn't. It's fascinating to me. Another example, just recently, about a year ago, my brand new car was outside my home, and I was a victim of a hit and run. And everybody around me was like, "Oh my God, that car, that your brand new car is so expensive, and I hope it works. And oh my God, it's going to be expensive to fix, and blah, blah, blah." And I realized that I was starting to go into the hangman. Yes, I'm a victim, and what if this happens? What if I can't get a new car? What if, I started to go into that. I said, I'm going to turn it around, and everything is going to work out perfectly and for the better. Well, it turns out that my insurance obviously paid for everything. At first, I was a little pissed. I had to pay a double deductible. But my car got fixed so perfectly, nobody would even know there was a problem. And the money I needed for that manifested. And in the meantime, my insurance kicked in too, where I had a beautiful rental car that I didn't have to pay for almost a month. And it was like a Cadillac, I mean, everything worked out beautifully with no major stresses. But for that to happen, I had to reframe my mind. And that's what the hangman deals with. So if you pull this card, let the fear come up. Because people see this like, oh my God, that card looks horrible. What's happening to me? And I said, you have to feel it before you can release it. That's another thing. Sometimes change happens when we finally stop repressing our emotions. Sometimes you have to feel that fear and see what your mind is doing before you reframe and change. Okay, so don't be the hangman. Okay, get out of that limbo, turn yourself the right side up and not upside down, and, look for a brighter day. Are you scared? Card number 13. Death. And this card always makes me laugh because people take it literally. People are afraid of the number 13. It's a bad luck number, and they're afraid of death. But what happens when we really die? We are transformed. And that's what this card really is about. The Death card can be one of the most powerful cards in the deck. It's the releasing of things that don't work. It's eliminating what's not working, and it's expanding your spiritual awareness. It is one who is committed to great change and transformation. It could represent the end of a life cycle and starting something new and better. It could be grief and letting go of someone who has transitioned. It could be, healing that physical death of a loved one. It could be a miraculous healing after a long-term illness. It could be releasing long-standing difficulty. I call death the new you. I find it kind of humorous that I obviously put a Gothic skeleton, Grim Reaper, because that's sort of the tradition of the Death card. And can you look past that? Could you see that when you die, you're reborn? Sometimes a part of us has to die before we can move on and move into something greater. And many people sometimes have a lot more tragedies or challenges in their lives to overcome, but they're the ones that can really transform. I'm reminded of my dad, who came from, kind of poor beginnings in Key West, who turned himself around and transformed himself into being, the head of the Delta Space Launch Program for NASA, and completely changed his abundance, married the woman of his dreams, had, a huge family. I see myself, who came as a child. I had severe health issues with asthma and allergies, and I used to get allergy shots in my arm twice a week too. I was always in pain with welts on my arms, and always sick with pneumonias and problems when I was a kid. And then I met holistic healers in my teens, and I changed to a vegan plant-based diet. And I haven't taken Western medication in 20 years, and I rarely get sick. At age 56, I'm healthier now than I was when I was a kid. I think about people that I loved very deeply that died very, very early on. How many people lose their husband at age 25 and then lose their second husband early too? I'm widowed twice. And yes, people could say that's a tragedy, but are you going to stay in your tragedy, or are you going to use that to expand and grow spiritually? I had a very, very dear friend who was stuck in her victimhood. And she had terrible things that happened to her. She was raped by her father when she was a child. She had all kinds of domestic abuse in her family, by her dad, her brother, then her husband. And she got out of it, and she became an incredible pianist, and very well known and very well liked, but she was addicted to her victimhood. And she was seeing a psychologist for almost 30 years of her life, and just stuck, victim, and not willing to want to transform that. She was getting something from her victimhood, of people doing things for her, or the ability to manipulate people, because she was in fear, you see. So we have a choice. Do we allow ourselves to expand out of tragedy and challenges, or do we stay stuck? One person who is also an Aquarius like me that I very much admire is Oprah Winfrey, who also came from poverty, sexual abuse, all kinds of challenges in her life, and transformed herself spiritually and also within her career to become, I think, one of the wealthiest black women in the world. And I think last time I checked, she was worth some incredible amount of money, like $60 billion or something like that, and completely revolutionized her life. I see this time and time again of people that come from things that seem hopeless and have transformed their life. One last story. When I was working on my master's in music, I wrote my master's thesis on Kurt Weill, who was a Jewish gay composer during the time of the Weimar Republic and Hitler. And he's most famous for his song Mac the Knife from, the Three Penny Opera. Anyway, during that time period, I had the chance to work with a lady who was in Auschwitz and sang in an opera chorus where of this opera called Brundebar, that was written by a Jewish man who was exterminated at the gas chamber. And she was the only one of her family to survive. She saw her dad shot in front of her. She saw her mom and sisters go to the gas chamber, and somehow she was spared. And I asked her, how did you get through that? And she said to me, I always focused on surrounding myself in white light and reframing everything I saw around me. So while people were being murdered, I said there is people out here that do love and care for me. God cares for me. She would focus on one little white flower coming up through the snow of her barrack. She reframed her mind and survived that and went on to live to be, if I remember, 92 years old, had a beautiful family, had tons of grandchildren. She transformed her life by reframing her mind. And I don't think anybody could, imagine anything more horrible than being in Auschwitz. So when people come to me and they say, oh, but, I have a little arthritis, or, I can't do this because I have to wear glasses, or, I'm not pretty enough, or, I'm not as, I don't have as much wealth as someone else. Look at all these people that have transformed their life from death. I mean, literally dark stuff, including myself, and that's why the 13 card is powerful. What are you willing to release to transform your life and get out of being in a state of death and not living? It's your choice. Bonjour, mes amis. Now to another favorite card, art. Art has been the focus of my life personally. I am a musician, as you know. I am an actor. I play several instruments. I'm a visual artist. And art can change your life. I put on my card, if you look at my art card, I have a Parisian man, artist, and I think about my love of specifically French Impressionism and art movements, and how art gives color to our life. Art is the creator. It's the alchemist. What are we going to create? And when someone pulls the art card, it could mean actually literally studying something in the arts. It could be time to study an instrument, time to study voice, time to, study visual art, to knit, to crochet, to pick up some kind of a creative pursuit. Studying art can also mean movement. So this could be getting into dance, getting into skating. Art could be time to renovate or decorate one's home. Art can be a personal makeover. This is one I really love because sometimes we're born and there's just things about the way we look that we don't like. And as an artist, we're chameleons. We can change our hair color and our hairstyle. We can, decide to express more of who we are by how we choose to dress. We can, get plastic surgery if we want to. Not that that's always the answer, but maybe for some people. And so I love this with art. A little bit about me too. I came from a family where I have always loved and been attracted to people with blonde hair. It's interesting. I joke with my friends that, my future husband is going to be, a blonde Australian or German or Scandinavian. It's interesting that my sisters are absolutely breathtakingly beautiful blondes, and I have a brother who is also blonde. And I was born with sort of reddish brown hair, which I don't mind red hair. I'm actually attracted to red hair. But I received my mother's beautiful, darker Spanish skin. And I always hated how I looked with my reddish brown natural hair. And as early as age 14, I started to tint my hair blue-black because I'm a goth. And it just feels me. And it's so interesting that people from age 14 to now come up to me and they go, oh my God, I love your hair. You're so sexy. And I feel me with blue-black hair. And what makes that wrong? I'm an artist. And isn't it true that people do that? They wear a certain hair color or a certain hairstyle to feel more them. And that's part of art, is we get to choose what we want to be. I have a sister who loves tattoos, and she has designed, her and her husband, tattoos that mean something very special to her. And that's really cool. Even though personally I'm not really a tattoo person, but I can respect that in them. I think that's really cool. I'm not really into body piercing, but I have a cousin and I have friends that do that. And that's part of who they are and how they want to express themselves. And more power to them. I think that is awesome, you know. And being someone who has been in fashion for many years, I coach models, and I did some modeling myself back in the 80s and early 90s. This is where we get to be chameleons. And it's interesting to go back and see, like, there's that part of me that can be that sexy goth vampire guy, and then someone who can be super Disney preppy in an Izod polo shirt, you know. There's that part of me that could put on glasses and be the professor, and the part of me that can be the seducer, you know, or be boyish and, you know, fool the camera. I'm always very flattered when people look at me and they go, "Oh, I thought you were 35 and I'm 56." You know, and that's part of art. We can, you know, revolutionize how people see us. We can be quirky and idiosyncratic in how we choose to live. People come over to my place and they go, "Oh my God, your place is so cool and unusual. It's like stepping into a Victorian parlor slash, you know, Ravenclaw Commons." And I go, "Oh, that's exactly what I was going for," you know, whatever. And that's okay. And there might be someone else that's the complete opposite of me, and they're like super 1950s modern with a tiki bar, you know, and that's cool. You know, we get to express who we are. We are individualized parts of God. And I love when I had a minister who told me that. Her name is Reverend Peggy Price, and in the Religious Science Church. And that's something I always remembered. We are individualized expressions of the one God. And when we're in that truth, we get to truly make our lives beautiful. And that's why I love art. Art is the beautifier. You know, so you might ask yourself, like, you know, what visual artist do you connect to? And get excited about that. Bring beautiful artwork into your home. For me, I've always been obsessed with Gustav Klimt. I have several of his repros in my home. There's something about the metallic colors he uses. There's one called Schubert at the Piano, which is like a ghostly painting looking through these beautiful autumn tones of orange and copper at Schubert at the Piano around Four Ladies. And to me, that has a lot of representation. I think of my three beautiful sisters and my mom, and we're all just enjoying music and creating together. So that painting has special meaning to me. As a goth, I love the artwork of John Atkinson Grimshaw, who did these sort of kind of creepy late night you know, portraits of London with all these kind of mysterious colors, and you know, but it's this kind of late night and sensual and romantic and dimly lit, and I'm attracted to that. You know, so how about, like, you know, what colognes and perfumes you like? You know, what makes you feel a certain way? This is where art can help you to beautify and to be more of yourself. It's a very personal card of expressing you. Okay, so how are you going to be the creator of your own life? How are you going to transform your body and your surroundings? Art. Love it. Be scared. Be very scared. Number 15. The devil. Okay, so here's a card that is always misunderstood. People pull the devil, especially people that are brought up in rigid Christian households, and they think, oh my God, the devil, this is a satanic thing, and oh my God, the tarot deck is evil, and we shouldn't play with that. And what the devil really means is, think what bedevils you. The devil is more about taking life less seriously. The devil is the joker. The devil is getting more sexual and more sensual, being more playful. So when you pull the devil card, it just usually means you're in this seriously rigid, this is why I kind of use, Christian anal retentive kind of box. And you're not allowing yourself fun. You're not allowing yourself humor. You need to be more playful. You need to find balance between your work life and your play life. You need to be less sexually repressed and more sexual and sensual. And you need to indulge more. This is like, when I think of the devil, even though I drew a really creepy, scary, romantic period Victorian devil, I always think about the cartoon devil. For me, as a kid, I used to always have that, the little angel on my shoulder, the little devil cartoon. And, the devil's, you're like, oh my gosh, I know I shouldn't eat a whole cake of tiramisu. And the devil's like, oh, yes, you do. You deserve it. You can do that. Your body will come back in the balance. And the angel's like, oh, no, you have to be strict and eat, organic fruit only. You're on a diet and you must exercise. And there's this, sometimes when you pull this card, it's like you're denying yourself indulgent. You're being too rigid, and it's okay to eat that piece of tiramisu or eat the whole cake if you're not doing it every day. So usually when you pull the devil, it's like you need to just have more fun. Also, again, we get into these rigid roles of repressing our darker side. Now, as long as our darker side doesn't hurt someone else, obviously you don't want to murder someone, but we might have that little part of ourselves that is attracted to horror or something a little darker, or maybe it's a darker sexual fantasy or something like that. And how many people repress that? And here's the thing. Sometimes by going into the dark, you actually become more in the light, because you can see here's people that are really in the dark that are, not balancing, and now they have addictions, or now their life's out of balance. So I feel that if you're always repressing, what usually happens, eventually you just wig out and you go crazy. So the person who's like, I'm never going to have a glass of wine because I'm going to be perfectly pure, and they're craving a glass of wine and making themselves miserable month after month. I'm not going to have that wine. I'm not going to have the wine. And then something emotional happens to them, and then they drink 4 bottles in one sitting. Is that really healthy compared to okay, maybe I'll allow myself a glass of Merlot once or twice a week? Much more better balance. There are people that are afraid of their sexual desires, and they don't communicate with their partner, and then they're sexually frustrated in their marriage, and or not even having a healthy sex life because they can't communicate. I was very fortunate with my first husband to have an incredible sex life. With my second husband, he was a wonderful person, but he couldn't communicate. And there was a lot of repression. And I'm just going to say, at times I was sexually frustrated in that marriage because he could not communicate. He would not allow himself the indulgence. So the devil represents your ability to break through these repressions. Okay. It's also, the devil can mean to be a little bit more rebellious, which is what has healed me in my life. When people and church and things are putting all these restrictions on you, you have a choice. okay, I'll be a doorman and do what everybody else wants me to do to make everybody else happy. Or I could say, fuck that and do my own thing. And I that's a bit Aquarius too. Aquarius is sort of the rebel. As a teenager, I was obsessed with James Dean, who was also an Aquarius, by the way. And this sort of like, rebel without a cause. He had all these restrictions in his movies of not being fully understood by his family or abandoned, and he created, I always think, a rebel without a cause, where he's not connecting with his father and mother, and he creates his own family with the Natalie Wood character and the Sal Mineo character. And it's interesting, like I feel like with this card, you're breaking through so much. It's about allowing yourself to enjoy pleasure, and so forth. And it's breaking through societal judgments of what you should do. Just because, maybe where you live, everybody's doing one thing doesn't mean you have to. And you might have ramifications for going against the grain, but that's what the powerful person does. So the devil is about do what bedevils you and have fun doing it.